All right, we'll go ahead and get started today with our first song, Come Now Is the Time to Worship. Glad everybody's here. It's no accident. And a first-time visitor or somebody who's been since the very beginning of this assembly. Where two or more are gathered in His name, Jesus is here. Let's go ahead.
Now is the time to be
So you head into our communion time. This is a really good song. Hope it encourages you and it helps you to worship during this communion time.
When we remember special occasions, we don't just sit in an armchair and sigh. We gather together at a significant site, we have a ceremony, we reenact the event. This is part of the human psyche. For that reason, if teenagers die in a tragic automobile accident, their friends put flowers, banners, and messages at the place where it happened. And when you visit the wall, the Vietnam Wall, War Memorial in Washington, where the names of all the people who died in the war are inscribed in the order in which they died, you will find flowers dedicated to a person whose name is nearby. And when we have Memorial Day to remember the soldiers who died in wars and defend us, we don't just sit inside the house and sigh. Dignitaries put flowers on graves, and the rest of us go shopping. There was a woman in Canada who described Remembrance Day, this is the same thing as Memorial Day in the U.S., as the day in which all the stores were closed and people went to parks. We don't have holidays. We have sales. But I digress. We can't remember things without reenacting them. I don't mean we have to reenact them, I mean, we have to find ourselves doing it in a sort of compulsion. We reenact them as if the event were present. Jesus didn't say, "Think about this in remembrance of me," to those who want to be saved by their sentiments, or "Understand this in remembrance of me," to the 16th century debaters who were preoccupied about the nature of the bread and wine. He told us to do something that is intrinsically human. Do this in remembrance of me. Communion is thus a progressive dinner party. Have you ever been to a progressive dinner party? You have appetizers at one house, a salad at the Clark's house, main course at the Johnson's house, and the dessert at the Joneses. So if because of your schedules you only go to the Clark's for salad, and a friend goes to the Johnson's for the main course, you were at the same meal, even though you were there at different times and in different places. When we take communion, it's just another installment of the progressive dinner party that began in the upper room and ends at the wedding feast of the Lamb. We have different schedules than the apostles, so they were at the course in the upper room, and we are at the course right here because we are at the same meal as the apostles. We're rubbing shoulders with them. We do not have many communions. We return to the same communion many times. Communion is an event that transcends all time. It is passed in the upper room. It is present in our service today. And it's in the future at the wedding feast of the Lamb. It is timeless. It is no less than the moment that we enter and experience the timeliness of eternity. And when we will all be there for the grand finale in paradise, the wedding feast of the Lamb. On Memorial Day, the past and present come together and become one. At communion, the past and present and future come together and become a door to eternity. We rub shoulders with the apostles, saints, martyrs, and reformers of all ages. We're in a company of angels and the archangels and all the company in heaven, and we worship with all our loved ones who have gone before us. For this is the place where the church militant, which is on earth, and the church triumphant, which is in glory, worship together in the presence of God and the adoration of angels. We take communion as much as we anticipate Jesus' coming, as we do in remembrance of his dying. Just as we reenact Memorial Day to remember it, we reenact the Lord's Supper to be in communion with him again. But it's more than a reenactment. It is, this is where I'm not too good at multitasking, it is a reenactment. It is the act of saying it over and over again. It's more than remembering, it is a remembering. In communion, we not only remember, we remember. We reenact, as in Memorial Day. But more than that, we actually attend the Passover supper in the upper room, and we partake of the appetizer course at the wedding feast of the Lamb. We take communion as much in anticipation of his coming as we do in remembrance of his dying. Jesus said, "This is my body, and this is my blood." And whatever he meant by that, he didn't say. Let's leave it to the theologians to puzzle over what the meaning of it is. It is the body and blood because Jesus said so. In some way, we don't need to understand. We only need to do as he commanded. I've read that people who receive organ transplants suddenly find themselves with an attribute of the donor. For example, a person receives a new liver and suddenly finds he has an allergy to peanuts, just like the donor did. If that is so, and if Jesus is right that the bread and wine are his body and blood, despite what any theologians say, you have just received an organ transplant and a blood transfusion. In communion, you begin your transformation from the innermost parts of your soul to the outermost tips of your fingers into the glory and likeness of Jesus Christ. Take, eat, remember. Amen.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we glorify your holy name as we come into your presence to do as Jesus commanded us to do, to remember to do this in remembrance of him. Help us to grasp the depth of your love Love that would give your only begotten Son to die for us. Love that wants to have fellowship with us. Love that is preparing a place for us in your kingdom where we can live forevermore and reign with you on high. Love that is everlasting. What a great God you are, and we praise your holy name and help us to draw near to you and to seek your face as we do this in remembrance of him. We pray in Jesus' name.
our heads in prayer. Oh, Heavenly Gracious Father, today we come here to worship you. We pause and we think of the people that gave their lives, wars, for our freedom to be able to work, provide for our families, a freedom that cannot be paid. We just thank you, Lord, this day that we're able to provide for our families. And with an open and gracious heart, we give a portion to you for your kingdom. Your kingdom will always be. We ask you to bless this offering that we give today. In the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ.
When the music fades, all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's a word that'll bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. This word, no one could express how much you deserve. Though I'm weak and poor, all I have is yours, every single breath. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus.
Good morning. So before we begin, since I missed the boat last time, let's begin with a word of prayer. If you all bow your heads with me. Father, as we come before you today, to the guidance and example of your word and those in it, I pray that you reveal to us today your truth, your plan for our lives, and how we can expand your kingdom in the world that we live in, and shine a light for Christ. Change the world through your power, for your glory. And it's in your Son's precious name that we pray. I don't know about you, but there are plenty of times in my life where I've kind of missed opportunities to honor God in speech and action. More often than not, I would probably say that I missed those chances mostly by choice. Fear gets in the way a lot of times. For me, especially fear of failure, fear of being shamed, fear of being the religious guy. You know, that one eventually nobody wants to talk to because you know what he's going to bring up. At least once, I gave up on witnessing to someone because I didn't think it would work out. I saw it failing before it even started. And other times I've completely missed out on a ministry goal or an idea, concept that I had because I didn't even think trying would be worth it. And maybe that's how it works for you. We all have different life stories and journeys and different battlegrounds. Mine is the workplace and primarily with college students. Yours may be a neighborhood, home, family, a place of business, a close group of lifelong friends, so on and so forth. We could go on endlessly. But if you're anything like me, for whatever reason, you can't just seem to do that one big thing for God that you've been wanting to do, maybe your issue is not having a dream or a vision at all. No vision for God, no big thought about this is what I'm going to do for Him. And we know that there's something wrong with the world. We see needs everywhere, right? That's not the problem. We know that we have the tools to set it right, that it's in Scripture, we have the Spirit. Why can't we do it? And to be fair, the world around us is adverse to who we are. We see changing cultures, people angry with Christians, and what feels like an increasing desire to push religious people out of the mainstream and kind of into the back of society where we're not heard. Fear, society that fears and maybe even hates us, apathy, all those things and more can keep us from seeking to be adventurous for God or accomplish exciting things for Him. But that reminds me of a story, and this is an old story. Dawn was just starting to break over the mountains. It's a very old area, very ancient. Trees, forests, plains everywhere. An army was bunkered down in the forest and in the plain. They'd been driven back, battle after battle, month after month, and left with few supplies, few weapons, and little hope. The top brass had no plans or ideas on how to win back the territory, but two soldiers had about 12% of the plan. They snuck out of camp before the soldiers on watch had caught them or could see them. They plunged into dangerous terrain. We're talking not just the mountains, there's animals, there's enemy soldiers that may be afoot, all sorts of different things that could entangle them. And the opposing army had blocked off the pass between two towering cliffs, miles apart. They had completely taken that over. We're talking thousands of soldiers behind it, everyone around. They were completely trapped. And these men went through all that territory to a battalion of nearly 1,000 men guarding that gate where the pass had been blocked. And there's no way to get there but up the cliffside. So they climb hands and feet, just bear all that. No climbing gear, no carabiners, no ropes, nothing. Just two men, all on their own, climbing up that cliffside. And the men who spied them first were perhaps a bit too cocky for their own good. They see two men, they don't look armed. We think we can take them. That's pretty obvious, right? They're not even a squad, they're not even a section, it's just two men. This should be simple enough. They were wrong. Way more wrong than they had expected to be. And no sooner than they started to laugh them off and even insult them, and the two men, just a foot soldier and a quartermaster, barreled right through them with 18 other men, fully armed men, not two, and just wiped them out. Completely gone. And this was incredible. Nobody expected this. The whole battalion heard it. It was like gunshots in a public place. You didn't know who did it, where it was from. Just caught everybody by surprise. And it upset the battalion so badly that they started attacking themselves. Friendly fire that did them in. And that's not a story from recent history. That's not the American Army. This is a story from 1 Samuel. And that's where we'll actually be today. So if you'd like to turn there, it's 1 Samuel 14, 1 to 15. And this is the story of Jonathan and his incredible faith that led him and his quartermaster, his armor bearer, to defeat an entire Philistine army all on their own. So once again, 1 Samuel 14, 1 to 15. Technically starts in 13:23, but I'll pick it up here. A detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash. One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez, and the other Seneh. One cliff stood to the north towards Michmash, and the other to the south toward Geba. And Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." "Do all that you have in mind," his armor-bearer said. "Go ahead. I am with you heart and soul." Jonathan said, "Come on then. We'll cross over toward them and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Wait there until we come to you,' we will stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands." And so both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. "Look," said the Philistines, "the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in." The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor-bearer, "Come up to us, and we'll teach you a lesson." So Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Jonathan climbed up, using his hands and feet, with his armor-bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor-bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre. Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field, and those in the outposts and raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. And so, if you're unfamiliar with 1 Samuel, this story is actually sandwiched in between two events. Specifically, in this point in Israel, David really wasn't in the picture. This is before God had chosen David to supplant Saul. Saul had already been condemned by God for doing the wrong things, for not doing what he's supposed to do. And God was pretty much at this point no longer with Saul. At this point, Saul was pretty much condemned to experiencing war for the entire time of his kingship in Israel. So Israel itself was subjected to war for many years. This is nothing new to them. The Philistines had taken over a humongous section of Israel and forced everyone out. There were no weapons available to any of the people. They had seized all of their manufacturing for smithing, so all the blacksmiths were gone. If they wanted to go to get their swords, or not their swords, but their plows sharpened, or anything like that, their axes, they would have to go and pay the Philistines about a day's wage just to get something sharpened for an ox goad, whatever they needed to plant. Everything cost them way more, and the Philistines shut down every chance of them rebelling. So even the Israelite army probably didn't have weapons. And it's hard for us to grasp that maybe as Americans, because we've never been occupied by anyone. We don't know what it's like to feel that violation of somebody taking you over, kind of emasculating you and taking all of the ability you have to fight back away from you. But that's how this army felt. And so Saul, they have no hope. Even though they have God on their side, they have no hope. Because as far as they're concerned, the Philistines had already destroyed every chance they had of beating them. Everything was shot down. They're hiding. The army is in hiding. There's no chance, no hope. And it's just so incredible. The whole passage really hinges on one half of the verse alone, which was verse 6. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Whether by many or by few. This is such an incredible point, because only one man out of this whole thousands of people seemed to get it. There's no hope. Everything seems shot. They have the hope of God, but it's not present for them. But one person gets it, and why is just incredible. Rationally, what Jonathan chose to do was suicide. Two men, seemingly unarmed, go up against an army of about 1,000 guys in a very fortified garrison, probably stone, wood, whatever they had available to be able to shut it off. It's completely fortified. 1,000 there, and then thousands behind it. So even if they get through the gate, by some miracle, you're pretty much trapped on both ends at that point. And on the surface, it's just incredibly stupid. They sneak out, nothing to prepare them. No savvy military commander would ever permit two of his best men to challenge a whole regiment with no backup, no real plan, and no armament whatsoever. That's the reason why they snuck out. Saul would have never let it happen. Nobody would have ever let that go. But that just underscores his incredible faith. And his statement about God is blind. Without a doubt, and this is also foreign to us, and Cindy kind of talked about it. We remember things. We have a sort of oral history even in this country about things that happen. We hear stories maybe from people who've gone to war or people who had relatives who were in the war. And we have stories passed down with victories and different successes, but oral history was so important to the Israelites. There's no doubt that Jonathan had heard the stories from all the way back in Exodus, or even before that, where God had saved them from Egypt. There was no doubt that he probably heard about Gideon, who saved an army, the Israelites, with just 300 men and trumpets. He probably heard about what had happened at Jericho and other places, other victories that God had given. So when Jonathan went, just him and his armor bearer, to the Philistines, it wasn't just crazy. It wasn't nonsense to him because he knew who God was. He'd seen what God did. He had probably seen God act in his life in the time of his father, when his father was still following God, and when he first drove away the Philistines when he became king. So Jonathan wasn't expecting God to save him for no particular reason. It's because he knew who God was. His faith was reasoned. It wasn't blind. That's a mistake that we often make. It's a slight tangent, but we often assume that faith is, completely without sight. Just a reminder, Jesus let Thomas feel his wounds first. It's completely sensible to base your faith on fact. And that's what Jonathan did. Jonathan's faith in going to fight people with no hope in a culture that seemed completely impossible to win, he did it because he knew who God was. His faith was sensible. And it's just incredible that he had such a strong passion for God's will and trusted that God would get the job done. One of the things that we often expect maybe when we see stories like this is that call from God. We're expecting a burning bush, a vision that comes like to Elijah, where we're expecting fire from heaven or some amazing call where God says, go and do this. Or who shall I send? Who sent Jonathan? I didn't see that in the scripture, did you? There's no call. There's no amazing revelation. There's nothing new that happens. But a man who saw what needed to be done, felt the need, knew who God was, and did a thing. A thing that seemed completely impossible by any regard. Completely impossible. And you might be saying, well, Steve, I'm just me. You could just say that I'm just Leslie. I'm just Gary. I'm just Debbie. And I'm not fighting armies. I'm not repelling foreign invaders. This isn't we're not expecting to go up against anybody with a pistol and beat 100 people. We're not looking to start a war here. We're just looking to do little things. Even so, the point of the passage is not about what they did, but the fact that God did it through them, regardless of who they were. We're talking about two men that went up against completely armed people, probably with bare hands, and beat them to death. 20 men in half an acre, so quick that God sent a panic through an entire battalion and made them attack each other. And which is a story which got back in the passage thereafter to the Israelite army, which then inspired them to drive the Philistines out of Israel. Which is insane. And it's not because of who they were, it's because of who God is and what he can do with anyone. So where we find ourselves in this passage is not the story itself, but in the nature of who we are and who God is, if we'll just let him do the work through us. As we said before, it's not like we don't see needs. We see people around us all the time who don't know Jesus, who don't know the Word of God, who are going without hope, who are angry, bitter, depressed. We see people suffering from all sorts of ills. There's still slavery in the world. There's still racism. There's still hatred. There's all sorts of horrible things that happen. You see it on the news. You can't turn on the news without seeing it. And we know we have the answer. But why don't we do it? And it's because maybe it seems hard. It's hard to take that first step and try. And we know we're without excuse. But maybe our mistake is to not start a conversation or to fail to pursue a ministry that we're passionate about. Regardless, that's actually irrelevant. Because the problem comes down to our hearts. Because if we have the knowledge that God can do it, and we have the knowledge that God can do it, Jesus said he overcame the world, then the problem is not in the internal knowledge, or maybe even the faith. Just in the heart. Knowing is one thing. Having the passion for it, doing something about it, based on that knowledge is something else. Because if I know that God can do anything, and I know that God can, I have no excuse for not talking to that coworker who I know needs Jesus, especially when I have the opportunity staring me straight in the face. That actually happened to me last night. It was the most terrifying thing. We started talking about whether or not the Bible is true, and I'm like, oh no! I feel so unprepared. And then I thought about this message. And I'm going to go preach on that tomorrow, and I realized it's not about me. It's not about what I know. It's about what God's going to do through me if I let Him. And I have no excuse. I've been trained. I ought to know whether or not the Bible's true at this point. And most of us at least have that base knowledge. At least I would hope I have it at this point after 3.5 years. But it's kind of like, and this is a sci-fi reference, but it's kind of like what Yoda said about Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, and I know Jeff is appreciating this. You have to unlearn what you've learned. We have let the culture tell us that we're irrelevant, that we don't matter, our voices shouldn't be heard, that it's not going to work, forget about it, it's impossible. But it is. You have to unlearn what you've learned. We can do it because it's not us doing it. Because it's God doing it through us. We're not beating armies. God's beating the army. It has nothing to do with that. That neighbor you thought you could never reach, the people you thought in your life you could just never get through, they're the ones that you can do that to. You can help. You can absolutely help. And I feel like so many times we let those little opportunities slide because we see big stories like this. And we get cowed, and we think, you know what, I don't have that incredible story about, like a kid that did something amazing for Jesus, Hear about those teams that, raise tons of money for charities and whatever. You hear about those stories and you think, I can't do that. I'm just me. You think, I can't reach that, kid that's next door, that college student, because I'm too old, they're not going to listen to me. You think, I'm too young, they're not going to change. Or maybe something else, outside of that. The person who's an atheist that just can't crack it. We worry about God coming to our rescue. We say, God, give me the opportunity. Give me the opportunity to do this. Or we pray for God to bring somebody in our lives to witness to. It's complete ignorance of our commission that God gave us in Matthew 28. He said, go and disciple. Go and make disciples. Like Jonathan, we don't have to wait for the call. There's a need, we see it, we have to have that faith and just do it. Because if we're going to wait, you say, well, I have the faith, but I'm just going to wait for God to give me the call to go do it. You might as well just give up because you're wasting your time waiting. God may, in fact, give you a call. God may give you a great big call to go do something. But in the meantime, we miss out on those opportunities to see God at work in our lives in ways we didn't expect by just saying something when it needs to be said, doing something when it needs to be done, and just trusting that God's going to accomplish it through us, no matter who we are. A whole world that doesn't know God is out there waiting for us to do something about what it says in here. So many times we're waiting for that golden invitation. We're looking through the chocolate wrappers, looking for the golden ticket, just thinking, okay, well, I'll get this candy bar. If I do this, if I do that, and we're missing out on everything else we could be doing while we're just hunting down little things. We really, I think we let that happen because it's easier to be apathetic and to be beaten to submission than it is to trust that God's going to do something, even with just the little things or even the big things. We think, you know what, it's just simpler to just wait. I'm going to wait for God to do it. And then just doing it and trusting that He's going to take care of it. The answer for us in all of this is to trust in the God that we know resurrected Himself from the dead and to act in faith at every opportunity. Where we find ourselves once again in this text is not about waiting for God's will. It's not about worrying about whether or not He can get it done. It's just taking that reason to trust and then doing something. And so the application on this is more complicated than usual because you say, well, I want to trust God, but how do I do it? how do I do it? And it's really just doing exactly what Jonathan did. It's looking at the experiences in your lives where you've seen God act, looking at the scripture for the examples of how he acted in other people's lives, and then taking what you know about him and then doing something. And it's just, that trust is just that one step. It's that climbing up the cliff, stepping outside, and saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And not knowing is not going to kill you, because you already know what God's like. You've had that experience. And it's just that little step. It's just the first step. The second one becomes so much easier. And speaking from my own reference, I had no idea I was going to do ministry when I first went to KCU. My thought was, I'm going to do something with psychology. I'm going to go ahead and do a psychiatric thing, and I'm going to help veterans who've been hurt and they're mentally unstable, and which is not a bad goal. But I had no idea that I was going into ministry, and the first step I took, and the next day I was like, oh gosh, what did I get myself into? And then the next semester, when I wasn't sure where the money was coming from, I was like, oh gosh, what did I get myself into? And the next semester after that, and now I'm like, oh great, the debt. What's the next thing I'm getting myself into? And now I'm moving 11 hours to Tennessee. And I'll be honest, this is a hard thing for me. This message is as much for me as it is for anyone else, because I'm like, where's the next thing coming from? How does this step lead to the next thing? But it's not about the next step. It's about trusting God with your next step. If you can take that first step, the next thing becomes so much easier. And what I'd like to do is really vision cast. And I don't really need feedback. This is something maybe more rhetorical, but what would it be like if New Hope Christian Church did this? If we all communally took that one step forward for maybe one person or just one thing in our life that we feel like God is just leading us to, that we see the need around us and just do it. How would our population change? I mean, to be fair and frank and polite, none of us are getting any younger. I just turned a quarter of a century last year. I'm going to be 26 in the summer. I don't like the fact that I'm only 14 years away from being 40. Somebody casually reminded me of that at work. In 14 years, I'm going to be separated from the population which I currently have been in with, which is college students, and that's scary. You're going to have to relearn everything to be able to reach them. But for God's church to survive, it needs to grow. The kingdom is meant to expand. And how would our community look if it impacted for Jesus every chance we got? If we represented Christ with every opportunity that God gave us, what would that look like? So this is an invitation to trust, to go deeper, to move past the hiding and to get into the fray, to roll the sleeves up and get in bare knuckles. Because God's not asking you to have the weapons. He's asking you just to take the first step and let Him take care of the rest of it. And it's the best opportunity we have to experience the miracle of God's power working in our lives through the Spirit, to see Him transform the world around us. And I can tell you, the church in America is like Israel. We have gotten so comfortable being the majority for so long that now that it feels like we're the minority, we don't know how to respond to it. Maybe we've made the mistake of being a little bit too political, trying to take the power back that way. Maybe we've taken our fights to the wrong places, but it's just trusting God is hard. It is. But that's what's so important. It's about being a body and digging into who God is, what we know He can do, and we know He'll do more than conquer, because He said He did. And if He did, and if Jonathan did, we can. Because once again, it's not about us. It's not about what we do in the world, politically, socially, educationally. It's about being who God said we should be, trusting Him to do that with every action and opportunity that we have. With the little things that trouble us and with the big things that terrify us. And what we'll see if we do that is that what Jesus did in the first century with just a few guys could happen in our lifetime as the living God moves hearts to love Him, even if we don't expect it. I'd actually like to close the story. It chokes me up a little bit because it's real cool. There's a college student that I got to minister to. I won't say her name just for privacy's sake. But one of her big things was how she responded to gay people. One of the big troubles she had in coming to Jesus was how she should respond to the homosexual community, because she thought that becoming a Christian would mean she'd have to hate gays. And we know better. We do know better. Maybe some of us struggle with that and how we respond to them, and it's understandable. We know what all that is wrong. But I had no words for her. I was just out getting coffee, and she invited me to sit down and talk. And I knew what I had to do, that this was an opportunity to be Jesus to someone. And the words did not come from me, and I found ways to not convince her that Jesus was right and real, but that being Christian means loving more. And that the love that the world has for gay people is so minuscule compared to the true love we ought to have for people as Jesus did. That Jesus loves everybody so much more. And the world loves just because it feels like it has to, because it's socially cool. But that Jesus loves because of who he is. And that love lives in us. And so, 2 weeks later, she got baptized. And it wasn't my fault. It was her boyfriend who'd been baptized just a few months before. And it was really amazing to see both of them change. But if you think that hearts don't change, that it doesn't work, it does. We have Testament proof. It's in here. It's in our lives. God is who he says he is, and he can do it with anyone and anything. And the hate that we feel people have for us can turn to love for Jesus, because it's not about us. It's about what God does in us, once again, if we just take that first step. Sorry for getting emotional. It's just a cool story. I love it. But as we come to a close, once again, the application for this week is just to think about that one thing, or maybe the big thing that you could do for God, to take that step and watch him work and do really cool things in your life and the people around you, and transform the world into what it was meant to be and what it will be when he comes back. So let's pray. Father, thank you for your word, for the comfort and for the knowledge that it gives us, the surety of trusting in you, and the incredible things you do through us, even though we're weak and we don't deserve your help. I pray that you'll let this rest on our hearts this week as we go about. Let it rest on my heart and the trouble that even I have with going out and proclaiming your name in a culture that seems just destined to get rid of you. I pray that you'll be with us, guide us, live in us, and empower us to do all these incredible things, because it's not about us, it's about you. And seeing your glory magnified in this world. And seeing you put things back to the way they're supposed to be. And it's in your Son's precious name that we pray. And so this is a time of invitation. So if you have any changes that you feel you need to make, or if you feel you want to take that first step in trusting Jesus, biggest step, feel free to come up.
Isn't it wonderful when you see somebody who has made their life to Christ, and it's basically a physical manifestation of God's power and love through a sermon like that? I really hope that video was going the whole time, except for that 40-year-old thing. But anyway, I really appreciate